And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Kanell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe. Smash that like and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate, where there have been some questions about whether Tom Fornelli, and if you're watching live, would be wearing some SMU gear. He had to really dig deep and use his creativity and his artistic skills for the Boston College gear. But Tom, if I'm correct, you've had that one.
Yeah, I said a couple weeks ago when I had the Memphis shirt that I was done buying shirts of teams that beat Florida State because I would go broke. But thankfully, I already had this one.
Yeah, we didn't spend much time. Maybe we'll circle back on a pun.
Well, Bud doesn't care, so I had to wait till Monday for Danny.
Yeah, we were live, Danny. I don't know.
I checked out like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
it ain't gonna get better.
Danny's still picking Florida State on the lock spot every week. There's still hope in there.
I'm done with that. By the way, that will not happen again. It's by the way, can we just clarify something?
Sure.
Because some sort of pseudo official SMU account was trolling Florida State and put out there that like SMU joining the ACC was the reason that Florida State sued the ACC to get out. And like, we can just like, it's cute. And like, it's a cute story if you believe that SMU, but that could not be the furthest thing from the truth. So let's just temper those troll tweets coming our way.
I think the cuter story is that FSU wants out of the ACC because programs like Georgia Tech and Boston College don't carry enough weight and don't put enough effort into football, and their way to save the conference is to bring in SMU, and then all those teams beat Florida State.
That is funnier.
That's a funny story.
That's the twist. It wasn't necessarily the expansion that Florida State voted against, because that is, I mean, just by your actions, you voted against adding SMU.
None of it's funny, okay? None of it's funny.
What time slot did those teams get this week? Oh, right. They're not 7 o'clock on ESPN.
Hell yeah. Time slot champions. Hang the banner. Hang the banner.
We're going to play that game. We're going to play that game. Nobody wants to watch SMU. You brought in SMU so you'd have a plurality of votes to prevent Florida State and Clemson from leaving the league, right? You didn't bring them in because they're good at football.
Time slot
champs.
Yeah.
Time slot champs. Time slot champs. All right,
let's talk about the teams that matter.
Hey, listen.
Let's just talk Auburn and Florida State every single
according to the time slots, the teams that matter, Florida State and Clemson. So maybe we'll give that a big game breakdown. All right, let's talk about something we do every single Monday. We'll go ahead and jump into this first because we take a look at the new college football rankings. Shout out Jeff Banks and Polo Sauce. And unfortunately for Jeff Banks, he got bounced. Texas held down the number one spot for a couple of weeks, and they no longer are number one in the AP Top 25 poll as Alabama makes a charge all the way up to number one. We have been passing this thing around over the first 5 weeks of the season. Georgia, of course, starting as your preseason number one, Ohio State getting a couple first place votes. Then all of a sudden Texas makes its charge after the big win against Michigan. Then Alabama, now 40 first place votes, more than I expected there in terms of the AP voters. But as Tom mentioned on Saturday night, a very reactionary group. I questioned whether the 5 voters who had Ohio State number one in the country, like how many of them were going to hold strong. 4 of them did. So listen, that's your core right there for the Buckeyes argument for number one, but it is mostly Texas votes that go to Alabama. Danny, I don't think that it's bad at all that we've got this debate and that we're bouncing back and forth. I am encouraged by the fact that we are reacting with new information here to the rankings.
I am too. I'll be curious to see what they do in 2 weeks too, if Texas does beat Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry game, and assuming Bama wins against Vanderbilt and South Carolina, I think are their next couple games. Like, they're not really resume builders. Will this be something that we see potentially go back and forth, throughout the season, which is great. I think that's the way it should be. I had Texas number 1, and I was, kind of going through, all right, what was more impressive? Going in and dominating the way they did on the road in Ann Arbor, complete control of the game from start to finish, or beating Georgia at home in a game where, you let them come back, you did win. I mean, it was an epic game. And I think it's a really good argument. Like, I like, if you say Bama's, like, there have been times before I've been fired up. Like, I can't believe they did this. It's showing favoritism towards a certain team, certain brand. If you have Texas 1, if you have Bama 1, I think you have a really good case either way. I think they're the top 2 teams in the country. So like, I don't have a problem with that at all.
I think we're missing the highlight here of this week's AP poll. Let's talk about top 10 team Michigan. Wolverines at number 10. I am not going to make fun of Michigan for being there because they are not a top 10 team. But
they're 3-point dogs at Washington.
Yes,
and Washington is getting bet this morning.
Yes.
It was 2.5 this morning, and now it's at 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more of a reflection of where we stand as far as the national picture right now. Whereas when it comes to putting together these polls, I think, obviously, the teams at the top are pretty easy because you've got all the undefeated teams, and you've got Georgia with 1 loss, and their loss was to Alabama. And then after that, I don't think anybody has any idea what to do. And I think that they're terrified to put, you could put an Iowa State up there, but Iowa State's Iowa State. You could put BYU up there, but it's BYU. Hell, you could put like a UNLV or an Indiana or any other undefeated team, but they can't get it in their brains. It's like, no, there's no way Indiana could be better than Michigan. It's Michigan. But you know what? Indiana might be better than Michigan.
I guess in theory, it's possible that they are. I have 4 teams tied with basically exactly the same, and Tennessee lagging that by like a point.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, Bama and Georgia just played basically to even on Bama's home field, which is like a 3.5, 4 adjustment. So on a neutral, Georgia would still be a favorite in the ball game. Obviously, like they were favored by 2 going in. The game went down to the wire. Like it had crazy runs, but ultimately, like one team didn't look way better than the other over the course of the entire game. I don't really know what Ohio State has done wrong. People dinging them, I think, are the same folks who dinged Michigan last year for just not showing any cards against all these kind of crap teams. Texas has the best win of the year by far. Like going and smoking Michigan is still pretty impressive to me. And Tennessee looks like they look really good, and they have like a legitimate win at Oklahoma in which they let off the gas. And then it's like, do you like Oregon? Do you like Ole Miss? Do you like Penn State? Miami? I can't put Missouri in that category.
From a rankings perspective, Ole Miss has got to hit the streets because you take away, all right, so you take away the 0 from the loss column. Now we're judging you against 1-loss teams. And it's like, what is your best win? Your best win is at Wake Forest. Your best win might be Georgia Southern. You have an incredible statistical profile in terms of the way you mashed all the teams that you beat, but there is not a lot to be able to hang on right there. Ole Miss dropping 6 spots to number 12 in the new AP Top 25 poll.
Yeah, and that's the point Danny Grace makes up in the comments there. His poll assassin focuses on the number 15 team, which was Louisville, losing to number 16 Notre Dame on the road by 1 touchdown and dropping 7 spots, while Ole Miss loses to Kentucky and only drops 6. That is
so people say, why not Missouri but Ole Miss? Basically because Missouri has just looked okay against teams that don't have real athletes. Boston College, Vandy, that type of thing. I'm a little more willing to excuse Ole Miss destroying everybody and then struggling when they played a team that has like real athletes on the front. Like Vandy doesn't have D linemen who are going to get drafted. Boston College doesn't have a lot of linemen who are going to go pro in something other than, all their linemen will go pro in something other sports with very few exceptions. So there is sort of like I don't know what you call it, like a boiling point or whatever, but it's just like over a certain level, like either you have players and body types or you don't. And Missouri hasn't faced that yet, right? It's like Indiana, to be honest, same thing. Like we could say Indiana is better than Michigan, but Maryland doesn't have linemen. UCLA doesn't have linemen. FIU don't have linemen. Whatever FCS team they play doesn't have linemen. We don't really know yet that Indiana can hang along lines of scrimmage. We know Curtis Rourke is back to form. That's awesome. And their receivers are pretty damn good, and their coaching upgrade is massive. But, I mean, there is a little – we're 5 weeks into the season, not 10. There are teams that just haven't played anybody who has real athletes on the lines of scrimmage.
Michigan doesn't have an offense, which kind of matters too.
That is true.
I was thinking that perhaps some of the because I was putting myself in the shoes of a Texas voter, because what has Texas done wrong, right? They have like that huge win to be able to give them an argument for number one. What would convince more than a dozen voters to change their opinion? Because you had 13 voters for Georgia last year. I'm assuming all those went to Alabama. That means to be able to get to 40, you had one Ohio State and a whole lot of Texas that changed their mind based on that win. And I can't help but think that for some of them, maybe it's looking at the Michigan win in a different light. I mean, I don't know if that totally works, because Michigan still is top 10 in the AP top 25 poll, but that could be just the head-to-head result against USC, like USC propping up Michigan in terms of the way that all these one-loss teams are stacking up. Like, if now, knowing everything that we know about Michigan, which again, Michigan beat USC, but perhaps a Texas voter is looking at that and saying like, okay, well, at the time we thought there was not going to be a better win all season than Quinn Ewers going in there, dicing them up. And you talk about let off the gas. I mean, Texas kind of let off the gas too near the end of that game. Like, they could have hung a number on Michigan, and it felt like they were okay. We did our job. We're going to be able to get out of here with the victory.
Also, like, it's not really Texas' fault that Mississippi State didn't try in that game. Like, I don't know if Levy and Sark have the same agent or something like that, but realistically, Mississippi State came out and they ran the ball like 90% of the time to start the game. They were not doing their tempo stuff. It was very clearly a laydown by Mississippi State. I mean, like, as they should be, right? They're the worst team in the conference, and their starting quarterback's done. Like, if you go your tempo stuff with the team that bad, you're like, hey, Texas, here's 14 possessions. Texas will be like, oh, okay, 14. Yeah, so we were going to score about 4.5 points of possession. So we're going to drop 70 on your ass. Like, that's just not. I would do the same thing, but should we really punish Texas for not winning by 40 against Mississippi State when Mississippi State was just trying to get out of there? Like, they pulled the Kent State thing against Tennessee.
I don't view it as Texas being punished as much as the Alabama win over Georgia is just more impressive than Texas's win over top 10 Michigan. But I do think that we are at like the point of the season where like there's enough sample to kind of have an opinion, but there's not enough sample to really mean anything, where the real annoyance with like brand recognition in these polls starts really coming out, because teams are just kind of where they are based on where they were in preseason. Whereas like later in the year, if Ole Miss still hasn't beaten anybody and isn't getting punished for its losses, then it's just terrible voting. At this point, it's just brand recognition.
Any other thoughts on the new top 25 movement within the poll, or any particular rankings?
I was really surprised Illinois held on, because usually when Illinois loses a football game, no matter who they lose to, they get knocked out of the rankings.
That game was 14-7 deep in the game on a big stage. Like, I understand what you're saying, but like, similar to some of these other, when it's scoreboard watching or just flipping around on your TV and watching and bouncing between games back and forth, sometimes hanging in the game will limit the penalty, especially when it's a team like Penn State.
But I also just feel like like the way I approach this, like, because these polls really don't mean anything. They don't have an impact on anything. Like, reward teams that are getting off to good starts. If there are undefeated teams, give them a shout out. Take a team with one loss, like you can knock, like Ole Miss, if you knock them down, they'll be fine in the long run. They'll be able to climb their way back up if they're actually as good as you think you are. Just give some of these other teams their flowers.
So to your point, Pitt, James Madison, Rutgers, Navy, these are teams that received votes and have 0 losses and are not in the top 25. Army, like all teams that you would give up Illinois' spot in the top 25 to be able. So it's one of those teams right there.
Yeah. I mean, Illinois' best win right now is Nebraska. It's not like Nebraska's been a juggernaut. And also the other thing that really kind of shocked me is that only one person put Colorado on their ballot. I thought that team was like, the media juggernaut. Apparently not in the AP voter like sample. Nobody likes Colorado in that sample.
Gee, I wonder why. When you have a vendetta against writers and you've called them out, said they're jealous of your players making more money than you, I'd say that probably doesn't endear you to many voters.
I was shocked.
Shout out to Randy Johnson.
Who had him at 25, by the way. Only one person had him on a ballot, and he had him dead last on the ballot.
There's a Fox Sports studio host who is the one who gave Colorado their one vote in the preseason. You didn't even get him back on board?
No.
Come on. So we'll continue to monitor things as well moving forward.
Oklahoma State still got votes.
Florida State did not get votes.
No, Oklahoma State still got votes.
Did they?
They got 8 votes.
No. They got 8 points because one voter had them at 20.
Oh, Pete, what are you doing, Pete?
61 voters did not have them on their ballot.
Oh, you know what? Pete lives in South Carolina. Maybe he was busy with other things this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, South Carolina was on a bye. Maybe he took a bye.
Hey, how about Duke Blue Devils 5-0 for the first time since 1994 after a 20-point comeback win against North Carolina? Not one vote?
Can't even sniff it.
Not even one vote? Come on.
Rivalry game.
What time was that game played?
4:00.
Oh, okay.
You're going to guess that if it was going up against Alabama, Georgia, ain't nobody see it?
Yeah, that might have been it.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Always appreciate that. Coming up on the other side, we continue with our look at some of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the country this weekend, a big staff change at Purdue, and upon further review, next.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
And now it's time for the Hellman's Stacks segment, where we discuss the quarterback and receiver duos to keep an eye on that we saw that were stars this past weekend, brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. May your dip be creamy and your quarterback be dreamy. Love it. All right. So I've got one. You're not going to believe this. This is going to totally blow your mind. There was a quarterback and a wide receiver that played really well. You know, they did exactly what they needed to do in the biggest moments. It was Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams. Okay. I don't know if you saw what these two did in terms of delivering on the biggest stage that the sport has seen so far. Jalen Milroe now has himself firmly in the midst of, or leading the Heisman Trophy conversation. And in a world that we thought would be dominated by Jeremiah Smith when it comes to the best freshman in the country, well, hello, Mr. Williams would like to say something as well. Williams with 6 receptions, 177 yards, and of course, the game-winning touchdown. Jalen Milroe finding Williams for those 6 times. He finished with 27 of 33 passing for 374 yards, 2 touchdowns, while also adding 117 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And something that is not a surprise to anybody, but I enjoyed Kirby Smart's analysis after the game when he basically said, well, what are you going to do? You know, like what are you going to do? He said, he was like, when you've got the way that Milroe can run, you know, it's not like we can double Williams. You know, he said, actually, I wish we had been more aggressive. You know, the combination of Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams is so difficult to defend that even Kirby Smart, widely renowned as one of the top defensive minds, leading a defense with some of the most talent in the country, is kind of like, there's no answer. You just hope that they don't play well. And that's kind of where we're at right now with the Crimson Tide offense.
I don't know, man. You're supposed to be a dynasty. You can't even cover a 17-year-old. Like, that's a little boy out there just killing you. What's
the DB play in that game that's the worst DB play we've seen combined from Bama, Georgia in a long time. And I'm not trying to take away anything from Williams. I thought Williams was awesome. But, like, some of these guys getting wide open for Georgia aren't exactly going to be first-round picks, you know. And a lot of these guys for Bama, other than Williams, are not like special. You know, Yeah, like has Kirby Smart lost the defensive back touch? It's probably too early to say that, but like that game looked like crap.
That quote he did attribute to Milroe, right? Like he said, what do you want me to do when I have so many pieces if I have to account for a running back
that can throw,
quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Like, so then he was like, and that makes a lot of sense because, yeah, if you just have a pocket passer, you can roll safeties, you can get help over the top, you can make sure your bracket coverage, all those things that you would traditionally do. But when that safety has to be like, holy crap, this is a running quarterback, I need to come up, you don't have that luxury anymore. And then it is like good luck, no matter who's trying to cover somebody like that. That twitchy, quick, fast. And then on top of it, when the quarterback doesn't run the ball, he can scramble and make you cover them longer. Like all of it is one of those things where Kirby's like, good luck. And he needed the luck. Because I don't know if there is a game plan then that you truly stop them. You just hope to prevent them from killing you the way that he did.
Yep. And this has been the Hellman Stacks segment brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Just like Jalen Milroe, Ryan Williams, and the top quarterback wide receiver duos in the country, tailgate snacking and Hellman's mayonnaise make the perfect combo, bringing out rich and creamy taste to all your game day dishes. So give it a try and may your game day be delicious with Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Shop at your local Walmart, Kroger, or grocery store and add some extra deliciousness to your game day dishes this football season. Whew. All right, let's see. What was our final, Bud? Did you end up storming all the way back and getting the win here?
Bro, I did.
Yeah.
That was pretty solid. What do we got here last week? Oh, I beat Danny, not you, by the way. I realized I like the team names are hard to find. So Bo Nix Hall of Fame.
So that's Danny's role right now is losing.
Having Jalen Miller on your team is
champion
is helpful, and then having Carson Beck on your team. So I had that stack, and then DJ Giddens, 15 for 187 for that ass. That's pretty good. Darius Taylor, I didn't realize they ran him 36 rushing yards, but 2 rush touchdowns. That's like an NFL type thing right there. And then 52 receiving yards, so that'll work. And of course, Kyle Williams in a losing effort against Boise. That's how we get it done, guys. Storming back from 0-2.
All right. Enter Sandman, gets a 226-203 win against the Llama Lavas.
Lava Llamas, get it right, Chip. Disrespectful.
Garrett Nussmeier continues to be the absolute anchor for our team. He's the ace, and we cash in on a little bit of Arch Manning as well. Tez Johnson, who apparently received some slander on this here podcast, but he was absolutely dynamic coming in with a number of catches, 121 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Bashal Tootin, 141 rushing yards and his score. Don't hate it. Trey Harris, yet again, just an ATM, 11 catches, 176 yards, and a receiving touchdown. But unfortunately, all of that in a losing effort. So that means for our, let's see, what's our standings? Currently, it is Chip in first place at 4-1, Danny's Beard at 3-2, Bo Nix Hall of Fame at 2-3, and the Lava Llamas at 1-4.
Injuries are killing my team.
Got to work on the $1 million meal table. Got to work on the.
I'm firing my training staff. They're all gone.
Fire the training staff. Let's go. All right. Speaking of a firing, Graham Harrell, your services will no longer be needed. We've got a September 29th relieved of their duties. Purdue deciding to go in another direction. The question that is like typically on these cards of ways that you discuss this. Question number one, I'm throwing out the daggum window. Are you surprised? No, we're not. We're 100% not surprised. I'm a little bit more interested in the big picture, Tom, because you've got some familiarity with Ryan Walters, but also just sort of the where Purdue goes from here. I mean, they lost their best wide receiver. We've discussed that a lot. They tried to make it work with Hudson Card and this, kind of air raid offense. And buddy, the quarterback play, the offense, I mean, it's all been really bad. What's the path forward here? And how does Ryan Walters salvage this thing the rest of the season?
I don't know, honestly. Like, you look at this offense so far this year, they scored 49 points in their opener against Indiana State. They've scored 38 points in 3 games since. They had the 7 against Notre Dame. They had 10 against Nebraska last week, and then they managed 21 against Oregon State. So, like, personnel-wise, obviously, we've talked about it. You just mentioned it. Losing Deion Burks is a huge blow to that offense. There was no ready-made replacement for him, and it's really impacted what they've been able to do. And just offensive line-wise, they don't look very good. Like, I think when it happened, like, you can go back, find the clip somewhere. When they hired Graham Harrell, that was one of my I didn't really love the hire at the time. I'll put it that way. Like, I liked what Walters had brought in with him on the defensive side of the ball and from Illinois, but I thought it was maybe a reach out to, like, Purdue wanting the fans not really loving the hire, wanting that kind of air raid kind of roots that have made Purdue successful over the years. So he kind of reached out to somebody from that tree. But if you look at Graham Harrell's history, I mean, I don't know, the guy just got fired. I hate to dogpile on him, but like, it's not like he'd been very well loved at any of his previous stops. I'll just leave it at that. So I'm not shocked this didn't work, but I don't entirely blame him either. So I think this is just one of those moves where the natives are kind of starting to get restless, and you've got to give them something. You've got to throw them something, to let them, like, tear apart and feel good about. But the timing wise, you've got the bye this week. Then they're on the road against Wisconsin this week. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's just, I don't know how you fire your offensive coordinator during the middle of the season and then expect the offense to improve. Maybe it will. Odds are it won't.
You didn't keep Deion Burks. Jamal Adrian's been out. You don't have any weapons to scare anybody. I don't really know what you expect here. That's a really, really hard job, man. I mean, Jeff Brom is one of the A1 best coaches in the sport. And when he would make a bowl, it was like a big deal. Like, that's a really, really hard job. I think the situation Signetti inherited in Indiana was way better than what Brom left over for Walters. And think about who's won there. Joe Tiller, and they ran like a brand new offense that the conference had never seen, and happened to have a Hall of Fame NFL player named Drew Brees at their peak, right? And then Jeff Brom, who, like we said, I don't know how you can win there personally. I don't think that's a winnable job.
No, the Brom peak was best since Tiller.
Mm-hmm.
Like 17 wins in 2 years. This many bowls in this many years. Like all of the different ways.
And in the West.
Yeah, all the different ways that you were grouping Purdue's success when you were promoting Jeff Brom, and all the articles were being written after his hire at Louisville of, how awesome he was. Like, all of the qualifiers had him as Purdue's best coach since Joe Tiller.
Well, I also think too, it's like circumstance. It's not just the division. It's that when they were successful under Tiller, it was Breeze, it was Orton, it was Curtis, it was a whole bunch of guys that they had. It was the offense. It was something different than what you saw in the Big Ten. And it was kind of like their version of the triple option, in that teams didn't normally see it and weren't entirely sure how to prepare for it. But as the Big Ten has expanded, and as this football across the country has changed, what Purdue's doing isn't really any different than anybody else for the most part. You see it every other week most of the time. So the advantage that they had in that system is gone. So now it kind of becomes, who do you have on the roster? And as Bud said, there's nobody on that offense that scares you. It's just
like the chat's like, you have to know what scoring points is. They've been banged up. A team like Purdue, if you get banged up, they're just cooked. They're not going to have good depth. I don't think they have NIL, right? I mean,
they lost scoring too.
They hyped up that safety who was like, none of us really thought was anything special. You lose like maybe the best receiver in the SEC, and you also lose like the SEC's best pass rusher in one offseason off Purdue.
Big Ten.
Right. No, like they both transferred to the SEC.
Oh, okay. I thought you said they lost the. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. I think that speaks to the,
Yeah.
This to me, I mean, this feels like one of those moves, which I've seen made before, that, you're trying to wake everybody up, and maybe you're trying to appease some of your critics as well. Mm-hmm. If you're like, this is unacceptable. Something drastic has to be done. Try to light a fire under your team as well. Even with Joe Tiller and a Hall of Fame quarterback, the most regular season wins they had was 8. I think it goes to the expectations of what this program is. I think you would like to be more competitive than what we've seen this year, but going bowling should be the goal, and if you get to 8, that's a huge success. Bud's got mute.
Oh, got the mute. Like in a non-conference league, I don't think that's reason, like to expect bowls at Purdue.
Right. I mean, I think that should be the goal. You don't think that should be the goal on a yearly basis?
Like if I'm taking that job, I want an extension if I make a bowl one every 3 years.
Right, like Kentucky was with Stoops. Like you get the automatic.
I think it's a lot harder than that, but yeah.
But also say one thing you need to do, and I don't know how easy it is to get out of it at this stage, but I've talked about this before. You need to talk to your athletic director about the way you are scheduling non-conference. Because if you are Purdue and you want to get to a bowl, like Oregon State is not quote unquote a Power 5 program anymore, but they were when you scheduled that game. Notre Dame is Notre Dame. You can't be playing those kind of teams in your non-conference schedule if you're trying to get to a bowl game every year. It's just
Purdue should have Indiana.
Like they're running like schemes that you would run if you had good athletes. There's a reason that Minnesota and Northwestern and these teams that can't get athletes play the way they do. Slow as hell. Don't allow explosives. Hope to get the positive variance on your side of turnovers. I mean, like that's why they play that way. Purdue plays a defensive scheme like they have good corners. They had like 9 personal, not personal fouls. They had 9 pass interference penalties on Saturday.
Don't they lead the nation in man-to-man?
They can't cover.
Yeah,
they don't have athletes who can play that. Like you took one kid who couldn't see the field at Georgia, and guess what? He's actually not very good. And I mean, he had like 4 or 5 PIs on Saturday. I don't really get what they're doing, personally. And like, I just, yeah.
Red meat, light a fire, not looking good. Ryan Walters.
Do they win another game?
I've got them as the worst team in the Big Ten.
They're the worst team in the Power 5 by a lot.
Northwestern.
Like Houston would beat them. Like Houston might shut them out. Northwestern is bad, but like Northwestern at least knows what it is.
Yeah.
Ryan in the chat, I don't want the damn tradition ended. I'm just saying you could still play Notre Dame, but you can't play Oregon State with them. You need to play Notre Dame and 2 patsies that you can beat.
You want Indiana's non-conference schedule. You know what you want to be when you're at one of these jobs? You want to be screaming for top 25 inclusion on September 30th and having everybody say, but you haven't played anybody. You want to have 4 wins in the bag and then be like, all right, can we go and win 1 or 2 coin flips to be able to make this a bowl season in conference play? Like that's what you would like to have, I think, in one of these jobs. An Ole Miss non-con, great call. Like that would be ideal if you are in one of these positions.
Ryan just wants to keep Purdue on Notre Dame's schedule so they don't have to lose to any more MAC teams.
Yeah, so they want to inflate. Yeah, they want to inflate Notre Dame's win total. I see how the Fighting Irish are doing. All right. Coming up on the other side, every single Monday, another chance to be able to look back at the weekend that was. There was some late night action going on when we were doing our instant reaction podcast. That got to circle back to that. Some games that we weren't able to really give a second look to or deeper analysis until Sunday. That's why we go under the hood. Upon further review, next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Always make a little time to dig deeper on the weekend before we turn the page to the week ahead. It's upon further review. There were terrible calls. Do we want to go ahead and jump in?
After further review.
After further review.
After further review.
If he is to maintain this pace, and if Boise State plays for the if Boise State plays for the Mountain West title and then obviously gets 1 postseason game, if he is to maintain this pace, Ashton Jeanty's going for 3,000 yards this year.
I think he'll get there.
Are you kidding me?
He's insane.
Like I think it's time. Like, are we? And he's got a long way to go. I think we might be watching one of like the great running back seasons of the modern era. And I'm not sure that it's like
You think?
Okay, all right. So it's that.
We are.
Okay, we are. All right.
I mean, dude, he's insane.
There's no reason that he can't. I mean, there's no reason based on Boise State's remaining schedule. There's no reason that with full health, we are not talking about one of the best running back performances of all time for a single season. I mean, am I going too hyperbole? I mean, I'm prone to hype in hyperbole. But
let's list the laundry list of incredible defenses he still has to face: Utah State, Hawaii, UNLV, San Diego State, Nevada, San Jose State, Wyoming, Oregon State. He's going to rush for 4,000 yards.
That's what I think he needs to do too. It's interesting. Boise State, they got a pretty vocal fan base, right? They can clap back with the best of them. After Milroe's performance, he was atop a lot of Heisman lists. After Travis Hunter's performance, he was on the top of a lot of the lists. I didn't see Jeanty on top of any, but he was on them, and Boise State fans were upset. Like, you better watch out. Like, this dude, what he is doing is better than any of them. If he wants to, I think he can get to New York if he just maintains kind of the pace and he has an incredible statistical year. But he's got to break probably Barry Sanders' record if he wants to actually win the award. But he's positioned himself.
That's what I was saying. So Barry had 26-28, 2,628 yards going into the bowl game. He had 28-50 after the bowl game because he went bananas. Well,
that's right. They didn't count those.
They didn't count those.
They kind of have to.
Well, and for the Heisman voting, you won't have
that before.
Yeah. So if Ashton Jeanty gets to 2,700 when ballots are due, I think he can do it.
I think he can.
I don't know if he can win, but I think he could be a finalist.
If he's at 2,700, it's going to be hard to.
But then there has to be no other kind of superstar kind of.
What is Alabama's record?
Team.
Right.
So I'm saying, and Boise has to be the playoff team, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
It's the way that
they have to run the table
Yeah.
from here on out. They have to win the Mountain West. I could see a recency bias scenario where Texas plays Bama. Milroe maybe doesn't have the game of his life. Quinn Ewers is kind of eliminated, even though he shouldn't be because of stats. And yeah, I could see it happening then. The other thing too, if you go back and look at the numbers versus Oregon, they also if Oregon does really well against Ohio State, or they play for the Big Ten and maybe they're the Big Ten champion, I think that helps his case a ton as well. Although then is it Dylan Gabriel that's all of a sudden there, that would potentially steal it. I think it's probably a long shot he wins, but I think he can get to New York without question.
I think Gabriel, Milroe, Gabriel, Beck, and who else? There's some of those names at the top of the odds board, which we see every daggum year. I mean, it's so funny. We're like, all right, so who's it going to be? And every single year, it's not a curse at all, but whoever's at the very top of that Heisman Trophy odds board, whether it's expectations or the way we talk about it, it is rare that we see those 2 to 3 names end up being the ones that last to the end. It's not necessarily a quarterback who comes out of nowhere. Jaden Daniels, I think, was 9th on the odds boards in the preseason. Joe Burrow was top 12 on the odds board in the preseason. Those two were, I guess you're coming out of nowhere that you could look for in the last 5 years or so. But yeah, I think so. Melvin Gordon ran for 2,587. So I think if we get to 2,600, we're having some serious conversations, and then comparing him to a Jalen Milroe, who's going to have Jalen Milroe is going to have those Manziel dual threat numbers, because Manziel broke the Tebow records, when he's going to have together some of those dual threat numbers that are going to be giving him a good argument. But I think Ashton Jeanty absolutely has everything in line to be able to continue and to be able to win the Heisman Trophy this year. And that would be a break. It would be a non-quarterback, and it would be not from a traditional power, but he's going to have a tough time to do it for sure.
What's going to Cam Ward, who was leading it before. Somebody asked in the chat, is Miami going to beat another ranked team? The schedule could be what prevents Cam Ward from winning this thing, because it might just be everyone wants that moment, in that type of game when it's back and forth and it's a ranked opponent and you're playing there on the national stage. I mean, is a game against Louisville or Florida State going to resonate with voters? Are they going to watch? That's another battle. Like a lot of the Jalen Milroe, everybody was watching that game, vaults right to the top.
Well, they'll watch the FSU game because ESPN will put that on prime time, I'm sure. They'll probably watch the Louisville game. How much the voters watch the ACC title game, if that is Clemson, that's probably
that would be the one.
That would be it. Yeah.
And there's certain guys who are high up, and I struggle to see the path necessarily. Miller Moss at USC after losing to Michigan, I don't really know that he can elevate to that. Does Will Howard actually have the numbers? I don't think so. Gabriel still has a path for sure, right? They have not lost. He is still on pace to break the all-time passing record. If he's 14-1 right now, if he beats Ohio State and they win the Big Ten, that's a clear path. I don't know that will happen, but it certainly could. Jackson Dart, I think, would have to light up Georgia and just go insane. But I don't know that he has enough left unless he, leads Ole Miss to the SC title, which is still possible if certain things happen. Ewers definitely has a chance. Comes back, beats Georgia. They still have to play somebody in the SC title game if they make it, right? I think Carson Beck still has a path, 30-1.
I was thinking about
Jalen. Goes on the road to Texas, big game.
Go to Texas.
I don't know.
Go to Ole Miss. Go back to the SC title game.
I'm having a hard time coming around on Carson Beck, seeing him turn into that player that's just going to be a dude. I mean, that was a rough first half. Even in the second half, a lot of the big plays that helped them come back, is he underthrowing them on purpose, to make sure he doesn't overthrow them, or is his arm strength in question?
The one to Young? Yeah, that was a little weird.
Yeah. There was a lot. There was a couple of them where the receivers just throw down. They just had to slow down a little bit. They were still big plays, still made the right reads. And sometimes you don't want to miss the layup. So, there's nothing worse than an incomplete pass when you overthrow them. I'm a little bit tentative on Carson Beck being the dude at Georgia that's going to bring them back.
I definitely don't think he will win it, but
right. Yeah, he has a path.
He has the path in a way that some of the guys ahead of him, I really don't think do.
Carson Beck has not been asked to be a cold-blooded killer that many times in his career. And I think he needed to be in that environment in Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way that is totally unfair for me to say from Raleigh, North Carolina, not being in that locker room, but it looked like the moment was too big for him. Looked like he got a little shook. Looked like he just wasn't seeing it. It was just kind of and look, man, Bryant-Denny Stadium can get like that. That place will swallow you whole. And it was good resiliency that he was able to, not totally lose it and be able to lead them back into that game. I liked Kirby's message to the team at halftime. I don't know what's going to happen in this game, but we're going to find out who we are. So, Carson Beck at least showed you that he's not going to curl up in a ball and take the beating. So good for him for getting back up and throwing some punches. But that was a moment. That was so first real setback for a quarterback who hasn't been asked to do that a lot so far. All right, what else do we want to do for a pun further review, Tom?
One thing we didn't talk about it much on Saturday night, but NC State finally got back in the win column by beating Northern Illinois 21-14. And just in case that score wasn't reflective of that game, or at least in your mind, put the proper picture, I will just share this. NC State had 11 possessions on offense, and they averaged 15.5 yards per possession.
Yeah, that's not 15.5 yards per play. That's 15.5 yards per
possession.
Yeah.
Their 2 offensive touchdown drives averaged 32, and they also had a scoop and score on defense. And it's important. The reason they only averaged 32 is because the other touchdown drive was a 3-play, 1-yard touchdown drive after recovering a fumble on the 1, and they still needed 3 plays to score against Northern Illinois. So it's possible Northern Illinois is just an absolute juggernaut, or NC State is still in serious trouble going forward.
The defense came together finally for them. So like on some of these, they didn't really have a great. There wasn't many yards they could cover, but I agree. Like they finally got the freshman game from Bailey, the quarterback. Like I thought he was the problem. So we'll see if he can bounce back.
I don't think the offense is good. I think
it's very bad, actually.
I bet NC State they covered, but I did not come away from that game thinking that I had the best of it, to be honest. I was like, okay, they got lucky to cover this, honestly.
It was a sweat.
I mean, well, it was basically 2 defensive touchdowns or 2 touchdowns that were directly because the defense got, strip sacks.
Yeah.
I got another thing here. Just wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Is Mike Locksley on the hot seat? Because Maryland is now 0-2 in the Big Ten. And like the narrative coming out of that, not program, but the fan base around that program was now that the East was gone and they didn't have to play Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State every year, they're going to be able to kind of finally flex their muscles. Except their 2 conference losses have been to Indiana and Michigan State, the 2 teams in the division that they thought they were the teams that they would beat regularly. And if you take out even when he was the interim in 2015, Locksley is now 14-29 in conference play. And it's like when you're not even winning a third of your games in the league, you're in your 6th or 7th season, whatever it is. And then you look at the rest of their schedule. Hold on, let me pull it up here. It's not great. Like they get Northwestern, they're off this week, then they come back in Northwestern, very winnable. But then it's USC at home, at Minnesota, at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, and then at Penn State. Like how many games are they winning in the conference this year based on what you've seen?
What was their preseason win total? Like 4.5, 5?
5.5.
So they're going to probably hit it, right?
Yeah, but like if you go 2-7 in Big Ten play, and you have not had a winning season in conference play in like 7 years, do they stick with him or do they move on?
I mean, they made a bowl last year. Like they made a bunch of bowls. I think that's really the goal at Maryland. Like Maryland to me is not a team that even in their very, very, very best year with everybody else down competes for the Big Ten. They're not. They don't get that type of player on their roster.
I think it's fair to ask the question. I think that the performance in some of these coin flips will decide it. I think.
Why should we expect them to be better than this?
Let's put expectations to the side. I think that if it looks like he's lost the team, he does not have the success to be able to fall back on if the administration is concerned that things are moving in the wrong direction quickly. And if they want to make a move because they're a Big Ten job and they can offer a good salary to a coach that they like. And if they think that there's a coach out there that might be interested, then yeah, I could see them making a move. But if they are able to win a couple games down the stretch, and if you don't have an obvious set of interested candidates that are out there, then maybe not. My thought, I haven't spoken to him, but my thought is that Maryland Athletic Director Damon Evans is kind of in Locksley's camp. Like
they've also won 25 games the last 3 years. Like they're not just squeaking it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's pretty good. I would bet a lot of money that if you replace Mike Locksley, the next coach to come in will not win 25 games in the next 3 years.
All right, I'll bring up another aspect to it then. 2019, early in the tenure, using 24/7 Sports' talent rankings, Maryland ranked 5th in the Big Ten in talent on its roster. Didn't have a winning season in conference. A few years later, 2022, they ranked 7th. Didn't have a winning season in conference. This year, they rank 14th. So you're not winning games and your roster's getting worse. You think they're really going to keep them again?
Yeah, I think they'll keep him. I mean,
well, no, look, you asked the question. That is the point here.
Yeah.
I think it's more about too, like, this isn't Auburn. Like, I don't know what's the pulse of the Maryland fan. Like, are they that fired up? Is there anybody paying to fly a banner over the stadium that says "Fire Locksley"? I don't know. That's why
I think if they're 2-7, they will be.
Yeah,
also,
and I think losing to Indiana the way they did doesn't help either.
I wouldn't use that team talent composite for anything. I don't think that's predictive at all. Like, personally, I don't use that. I would just use the straight recruiting rankings. Team talent composite, I don't have any hand in that. I would not use that.
I'm not using it for a power rating. I'm just pointing out that the talent on the roster, which is based on those recruiting rankings, seems to be going down.
Bud, What'd you make of LSU's defense against South Al?
Yes, I was joking a little bit that I was going to upgrade LSU's defense when Harold Perkins got hurt, but now I'm not joking. I'm serious. Like, I think they're better without Harold Perkins. I think it allows them to play more the style of defense they should be and not try to kind of square peg, round hole something. So I do think they're improved without having to like force him onto the field. He's an amazing athlete, just not a great football player.
Well, look, LSU's got they got some tough offense. Like, I know South Alabama, pasted their FCS team in App State, but we'll see as LSU's challenges continue here when they get into the thick of conference play.
I did get a South Alabama Sun Belt future though before that game, and I feel even better about it after watching that game.
Look, some belts, Texas State, it's got some issues right now.
But James Madison is the power in that conference right now, but I feel like South Alabama's kind of got some juice to it.
And they still do division play, so all South Alabama has to do is win the West. Then you've got one shot at glory, and at least maybe a hedge
opportunity.
Yes. Danny, do you see a world where Colorado wins the Big 12?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably where, and I heard you guys talking about on the reaction pod, that, is the winner 9-3. Does that get you into the championship game? I wouldn't bet it, because I've said this about Colorado for 2 years now. I never have a really good feel for where they're going to be, including before the game. I see Rick Ross in the locker room before the game, and I see him in there like having a concert, and they got the speakers blaring. Everybody looks casual. I'm like, is this team ready to go? Yeah, they looked ready to go. I mean, they just do things differently, and that's something they hung their hat on. But at the same time, I could see them absolutely just coming out and laying an egg down the road too. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I mean, clearly that was a huge win for them. They looked more physical than we've seen them all year. I think 8-4 is probably the highest I'd be willing to say, all right, I think I could envision that. And I don't think that gets them to the Big 12 championship game.
I don't think so either.
No. So I guess I would say no. But 8-4 is one heck of a turnaround. It's a pretty impressive story. That's the story that we got out ahead of ourselves last year. Like, that would be worthy of note if they do it this year.
I know that could get Deion Sanders an NFL job.
That's right.
But you tweeted it this morning. It's like the difference between team 3 and 15 in league is what, 2 field goals?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I looked at my numbers. It's like, okay. And then I looked at ESPN's FPI, and they have it like 5 points difference between team 3 and team 15.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I'm conference to watch.
I am so I'm ready to see Iowa State really start to get tested. Iowa State, number 10 in the CBS Sports 134 as it was updated.
Nice.
Iowa State is taking care of business. We discussed specifically the Houston game, but I'm ready for them to start playing the best teams in the conference, because we will either have...
You could be waiting a while, though.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, we're just going to sit here, and as long as Iowa State doesn't screw up, and right now they seem like one of their greatest strengths is that in a conference full of teams that are screwing up, Iowa State is not screwing up. Matt Campbell, now like the program's winningest coach, is just out here like, all right, guys, don't screw up. If we just go out there and be us, and we do it without screwing up, then the don't screw it up Cyclones are going to end up in the Big 12 title game with a shot to play their way into the college football playoff. I'm sort of fascinated with that aspect of this, because I think they've been flying off the radar. And as they continue to handle their business, they probably will remain off the radar. Yet there are places like they're ranked in the top 20 of the AP poll. They're number 10 in CBS Sports 134. That 0 in the loss column is going to continue to get them rising up. We'll see if the quality is able to match the way this thing has started.
They are by far the most likely team, at least in my numbers, to reach the Big 12 title game. I don't think they're the most likely to win it, but when I was doing my updated Big 12 projections, I actually ended up having Iowa State rather as the team to come out of the Big 12, just because they're so likely to make it.
So who else? Was it there?
So you have factored in there Cam. Like, what is the Cam Rising factor right
He's
now?
dead.
I mean, look, if Rising plays, they're the best team in the Big 12,
Right?
And I think by a meaningful amount in my own numbers.
Same.
I don't think
without
it's
him,
really that close between them.
But without them, they're awful. Like they're like such a massive drop off. I'd say awful, but they're like a middle of the pack team. And in all these one possession games, when there's not that much difference, that type of player makes a huge difference.
He's like a full touchdown. I mean, like they go from like a 17 to like a 10 ish.
I'm so
you think about what did that game close on Saturday night? Arizona catching 8.
Yep.
It's like we'll give Utah a full home field of 3. So that like 5 on a neutral without Rising. We think Arizona's probably like a 5. So that makes Utah without Rising like a 10. Just kind of back of the napkin, clean math on it. A 10 is what, top 3rd in the Big 12, but not like great. And that's assuming that game closed efficiently, which the result on the field says perhaps not.
So you've got, when you said 3 through 15, you're saying Iowa State, Kansas State is the class of the conference. Utah.
No, I was saying Utah with Rising.
Okay. And then so you don't have Kansas State at the top of the pile, basically.
I have Utah with Rising, then Kansas State, then Iowa State.
And then who knows? Shruggy shoulders. Because we've downgraded Oklahoma State as fast as a system would let you, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I also thought too, upon further review, what Avery Johnson did, bounce back game, like that is the one thing I want to see out of everybody. You have the awful game on the road, 2 picks, probably cost your team a win. How do you respond after that? I thought he stepped up. And of course it helped having DJ Givens step up and have a huge supporting effort for him as well. But I thought Avery Johnson played like the way you want to see a quarterback play, unflappable. Like it doesn't phase him. It doesn't affect his confidence. They had a really good game plan for him too. But talking about teams in the Big 12, like after that loss, it's like, did they make a mistake? Kind of like Oklahoma was feeling after they had to bench Jackson Arnold. No, I think they got their answer.
Going backwards for a second here, I agree with you. I thought Avery Johnson looked good, but going backwards, let's assume for a minute Cam Rising is alive, which he's not. But if he is, can we be sure that he is that valuable considering he has played 2 games in the last 2 years? Actually, only 1.5 games in the last 2 years. And that game was against Southern Utah and Baylor.
But buddy, that 1/2 against Baylor. Oh, buddy, that 1/2 looked good.
But I'm just saying, like, I think Cam Rising does make Utah the best team if he's alive, which he's not. But I don't know, man. When you've been off that long, I don't know if we can just expect that guy to return from the dead and be the same guy he was before.
I mean, I thought he looked really good against Baylor. It is just a half. I mean, they were on pace to win that game by like 50. We know Utah's defense is really damn good. We have a pretty big sample set that Wilson is bad. Oklahoma State is the only time in which his numbers were decent, and he made some decent plays, but also some real sketch ones, and his receivers bailed him out like crazy. I mean, there's the one catch where the guy's like behind his head, and I mean,
his touchdowns were wide open, schemed up, like as all get out.
I'm confident that's a touchdown drop off, personally. And it's not all that I think Rising some NFL guy, but Wilson to me is not a playable quarterback if you're trying to win a conference.
Yeah, no, I understand that part of the equation for sure. I'm still kind of skeptical on Utah, even with Rising at this point.
Well, and also like to get really reckless and unfair with it. I mean, I would hate if I was Money Parks, or if I was Micah Bernard, or if I was like somebody else on that, or Dorian Singer. Like if I'm somebody else on that offense, and if I am as in the dark as everybody else is, you're like looking at Cam like, all right, so what's the deal here? What are we doing? Like at some point, and again, being entirely reckless and unfair, the cloud of it all is going to prevent a team from coming together and being the best version of itself.
They're on a bye this week?
Yes.
Yeah. I would love being Money Parks, because then my name would be Money Parks,
That's
and I would have a record
absolute
deal.
Fair. Poked a hole right in that argument. You got it. But yeah, we'll continue to see how things go in Salt Lake City. A stunning late night development where the team was just not competitive at home and playing. And like when the students are clearing out before the end of the game, that's not the Utah that I know and love. So it was a great result for Brent Brennan and the Wildcats, but we'll continue to monitor that situation with the Utes.
They get a month to get healthy and play some teams that I think are decidedly bottom half of the conference. Arizona State, TCU, at Houston, BYU. Now BYU's ranked, but like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're just more like
I ain't trusting nothing with the Holy War.
That's fair. But I don't think BYU can score on Utah.
Quick note here from our friend Bill Connolly of ESPN. He's been on the podcast a bunch. He's a big fan of the Cover 3 podcast. We had all the controversial reviews. How about there have been more penalties this year? Did y'all see this note? So far, teams are averaging 6.38 penalties per game and 56.4 penalty yards per game. Last year, the season as a whole, that is up almost half a penalty per game nationally and about 5 yards nationally. And then even if you were to just look at the early season, imagining that things are sloppy earlier and then they tighten up late, we are way ahead of pace as they were under 6 penalties per game last year. And if you take out the opening weekend, which actually had the least amount of penalties in the country, we have hit a point where the last couple weeks are just flag fests. Is that officials? Is that teams? Is there any signal to this noise that we've had more penalties this year than we have in years past?
Is that timestamp? Is it through the same number of games?
Yeah, they said before October, teams averaged less than 6 penalties per game and 52.7. Right now, we're at 6.38 and 56.4. So
the one penalty I have noticed is that they are calling the disconcerting signals a lot more, like defensive lines who shift like crazy to try to get the offense to jump like that. Those have been called. Just anecdotally here, I'm noticing that a lot more. I feel like in week 1 and week 2, it was happening multiple times per game.
I think it could be. I don't want to blame everything on the portal, but you have turnover. You have players thinking a lot more. They're not as disciplined as they've been before because they've got a lot on their plate. That could be a part of it. It's a little bit sloppier, especially early in the season.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The fluid team, procedural penalty. I do feel like procedural penalties, and I haven't noticed that on a Saturday, but when I was like, okay, so what kind of penalties are these? I don't see a ton of crazy personal fouls. I don't see a ton of, it's mostly procedural penalties and holding. It's kind of where we're at. And a lot of holding, I think, ends up coming down to continuity and preparation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's signal, if it's just noise. I have no idea. What I do feel pretty confident in is there are too many rules. And you're asking officials to do way too much and to monitor way too much. And when you give people 1,000 things they're supposed to be on the lookout for, they're going to find things they're supposed to be looking for. That's their job. They're told that we got to call this, we got to call this, we got to call this. So all they're hearing is we got to call, we got to call, we got to call.
Question for you guys, because the chat has mentioned this a lot. Does 11-1 Indiana make the college ball playoff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely better.
Especially because
they might play only 2 teams that make a bowl. Or they might play only 3 teams total that make a bowl.
11-1 Indiana kicks ass. Therefore, 11-1 Indiana deserves to be in the college football playoff. The chip playoff rating system says, do you kick ass or not?
So Michigan that scenario would probably be beating Michigan at home, losing to Ohio State on the road.
And beating Nebraska at home.
Yeah, they're in. 1,000%.
They're in.
I mean, man, that the bottom 9 games of that schedule really would have me wondering. Can you make it to the playoff if you play?
Luck of the draw.
If you think I bitch about this 12 team enough now, just imagine if an 11-1 Big Ten team gets left out for a 9-3 SEC team that lost to Kentucky at home.
We'll be brothers in arms on that one, by the way.
Because power ratings say they're better. Who gives a shit about the power ratings at that point? The results are the results.
Yeah.
I got your back on that one. We can be brothers in arms.
I don't really think they are, personally.
Think what?
I don't think the results are the results if you're playing like that bad of a schedule. I mean, if that's how it plays out, if you play 3 bowl teams and 9 non-bowl teams, like that's kind of crazy.
The only way it gets better, the debate, if it's a Notre Dame with that schedule and their loss.
I don't know what to do with that, but
all right. I mean,
you would put a 9-3 Ole Miss in over an 11-1 Indiana.
No.
Is Ole Miss playing double the number of bowl teams?
Don't
like
ask
a lot
more
more.
questions. There's no way.
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, for sure. Like Kentucky would be what, the 3rd best team that Indiana would have played, and they would have played 3 or 4 more difficult games as well.
All right, man. Cool. More games matter except for Bud. The results don't matter.
11-1 is in the playoff.
11-1 Indiana is in the college football playoff invitational.
I think Bud's just trolling me at this point.
Yeah. All right. So, little bit of a schedule change. We love the football. Has us going a little bit early, but we're still on television, baby. 1 p.m. Eastern time, CBS Sports Network. Come join us as we set the table for the week ahead in the Big Ten. Then on Wednesday, we'll be back here at 11 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube. And if you want that show from CBS Sports Network, it will be available on demand on YouTube and also in the podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Then at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, it'll be Big Game Breakdown. Thursday, another set of locks, and you know what to do because we are working on a subscriber goal. If you have not subscribed on YouTube, go hit that, turn the notifications on. Surprise is coming your way when we do. And you can follow him on Twitter at TomFornelli. You can follow him at Danny Kanell. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.